want to welcome you to Town Hall. This is my very first Town Hall, not your first Town Hall. However, um, I'm excited to be a part of it. Town Hall is typically a pretty interactive experience. Unfortunately, given the fact that we made the decision to truncate it for 50 minutes and change the time to attend, many of us will attend Commissioner Tommy Young's funeral service. Commissioner Young served as the chair of the Spartanburg County Commission on Higher Education for almost 10 years. Um, he was integral in our work on campus and was well known and respected in the community. I had an opportunity to meet Commissioner Young in the spring when I interviewed for the job here as chancellor, and he was very warm, very inviting, and I just hate that I never had the opportunity to really get to know him and work with him. We're planning additional tributes to him, and we'll keep you apprised of the opportunities to participate. So let us be very thoughtful and prayerful for his family during this very, very difficult time. This morning, we're going to be extremely focused because I know there are some things that you want to achieve, and I thought it was important and very prudent that we have this town hall and give some insight and direction before classes start in the next 3 weeks or so. So we have, you'll hear from Cheryl Turner Watts. I know all of you are very, very interested in where we are financially. The Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, Cheryl, will provide a brief overview of the university's financial position, including a budget summary for this next academic year. You're going to hear from Danette. Danette is the Vice Chancellor for Admission and Enrollment Services, and we'll provide an update on the enrollment and her team's work and recruitment efforts and getting folks in our residence hall and getting our class started so we can have students to teach and to participate in our learning process. We'll also have Mary Butcher, our Special Assistant to the Chancellor for Public Health. I've enjoyed working with Cheryl, Danette, and Mary during this my 4 weeks here so far. I'm in my 4th week, completing my 4th week. And she'll provide some information on how we anticipate the ongoing pandemic could impact all of us and how we hope to, how we'll continue to address that. So our intent this morning is to provide some information we know you're wondering about. Got some feedback here. And we'll present a series of very brief presentation, very focused presentation. Then as time permits, we'll open the floor to a few questions. Given that we have less than an hour this morning, due to the unexpected and fortunate circumstances that I've talked about earlier, we're asked that you put your questions in the chat box. And we'll collect those questions, and our Vice Chancellor will prepare and share the appropriate responses for all the questions that we aren't able to answer today. Kim Purdy, our Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Dean of the University College, has graciously offered to serve as our moderator this morning. And so she'll keep us all on task. She will prioritize the questions. Following the presentation, as time allows, you can raise your hand to ask a question, and Kim will call on you. She'll go between questions that have been put in the chat box and questions that that you raise your hands for. Again, please do type your questions in the chat box. We want to answer your questions. We know there are a lot of questions out there about a number of different things. So, but I thought it'd be important that I really give you an overview of my vision for the University of South Carolina Upstate. One of the things that attracted me so much to this institution is that it is a comprehensive regional university. It has an enormous amount of diversity. And that diversity is an asset for our institution. So my vision is to really elevate innovation. My vision is to look at the changing dynamic of higher education, look at the growth in the region and the role of a comprehensive university in the region. Also, look at potential partnerships, Greenville, the economic impact in our region. We already know that we have a $500 million economic impact annually, and that number is going to continue to change. And then really do a lot of thinking about the value proposition for USC Upstate. I believe strongly that we are a destination institution, and we have to be able to clearly articulate what our value proposition is. I've done a lot of strategic planning over my career. My previous institution, I was one of the co-chairs for our strategic plan, and that strategic plan guided us and continued to guide the institution through some enormous growth opportunities. And having that moonshot or having that direction for where we're going and how we're going to get there allow us to be nimble, to be much more focused, to know where we participate and where we don't participate. And so I really, really value the work that you have already done with the Up Together strategic plan as a solid plan. And most of our work going forward will look at how we can build on what you have already done. I want you to keep in mind is that the work that you did in the Up Together strategic plan really has laid a very, very solid foundation. But I think it's appropriate for us to ask the question, what has happened over the last year to 2 years that may need to be looked at again? How has the pandemic impacted the trajectory that we had put ourselves on? Do we need to make changes? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to incorporate things that we did not anticipate? One of the good things about higher education is that we are built around the paradigm that we are preparing individuals for futures that don't even exist. And so we experience today don't exist, rather. So we experienced it ourselves within the context of this particular pandemic. I've been briefed around the framework and the implementation of the plan. What we began with the student education and the work that you did in that plan, Pam Steinke, the vice provost, and this is leading this work, and we have talked about it a lot. And we're going to continue to convene and move things forward. If you think about the plan, here are the things, the key elements of your plan, 3 major initiatives that came about out of the strategic plan work between 2018 and 2023, the 5-year plan. And we may even think about how do we continue to advance that particular plan or even expand it to an additional 2 years to incorporate any new ideas that we think about. One of the important things that I noticed is that we're going to have to revisit that plan with our stakeholders. This plan was established to provide rigorous, career-relevant, and accessible education. This career-relevant space aligns so well with our QEP of helping to prepare our students around professional development and career relevance. And so we want to stay focused on that as our accreditation is right here this year on us. Also, the plans by enhancing the quality of life in upstate South Carolina. That is so critical. I think there was a lot of intentionality in changing the name of the university from the University of South Carolina Spartanburg to the University of South Carolina Upstate because we recognize that we can have an enormous impact and footprint in this upstate region of South Carolina. And then by being the university of choice for faculty, staff, student, and the community. That is a very bold and very provocative statement, and we want to continue to see that particular alignment. Next slide. Back to the previous slide, 2 slides back with the Chancellor's Retreat. Yeah, thank you. So on July 22nd, I pulled this team together. Many of you know that I expanded the Chancellor's Cabinet to include our deans, to include the chair of the Faculty Senate, we'll include the chair of the Staff Senate, and 2 other AVPs on the cabinet as well. I think it's so critically important that we have more voices of our leaders as we make decisions to really advance our institution. We had a very phenomenal retreat. Mr. Jordy Johnson co-chaired the retreat with me in terms of facilitating the executive panel discussion. We had the chair of the Spartanburg, Spartanburg, Alan Smith, to participate. We had Carlos Phillips from the chair of the chamber in Greenville. We had one of our alums, Tori. I can't think of Tori's last name right now, but we were very, very proud of her. And then we also had the president of the Greenville, of the Spartanburg Regional Medical Center, a part of that. And that whole conversation really was about how they see the University of South Carolina Upstate and how important we are to the growth of this particular region. And what I often find is that people outside of our community think so much more of us sometimes than we even think of ourselves. or even see us in a greater role than we even allow ourselves to think about the work that we do every day. And so I was glad to hear that, glad to see that alignment. We focus on trying to establish the value proposition for USC Upstate around increased enrollment, economic regional development, becoming the institution of choice, bold and effective institutional leadership, and building a strong brand. And embedded with all of that is many of the things that you had already talked about in your strategic plan and established, but it's also being much more aggressive in some of the spaces that we think we have some really exceptional opportunities. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing. You're going to hear a lot more about the strategic plan. We're going to do more alignment. We're going to test our value proposition in the community and say to them, this is what we believe our value proposition is. Talk to us about how you see that statement. Talk to us about how you see us as well. So I know that many of you have questions about finance, and we can prepare for Cheryl to talk in a minute. So I want to introduce her comments. Dr. Secretary and I and Cheryl, the three of us have been sitting down having a lot of conversations. So you can advance the slide to the finance part, to the next one. Thank you. And so we've had a lot of conversations about our finances. And I am so pleased to report that the team here, led by Cheryl Turner-Watts and her team, did a really, in my opinion, a phenomenal job in preparing us to mitigate for FY22 any enrollment decline that we may experience. And what I mean by that, the way you all participated in the budget reduction last year, even though it was difficult, we froze positions, we did a number of things, but the stewardship that existed during that time really has allowed us to be able to absorb a 5 to potentially 7% enrollment decline without having to come back and ask the community to experience additional cuts. Now, I hope you appreciate what I just said and what you all did, because that's really, really important to understand that the way you participated in that last year, the things that were done to save dollars, to move monies away, we had to freeze some positions that we know that have stressed you. So thank you so very much for all of you who stepped up and filled the gaps. Really put me personally, as a new chancellor coming in, I would hate to have to come in and oversee my first year of budget reduction. But I think this 5 to 7% that we can absorb without having a new budget reduction, we're still going to have to keep some things in control that we've already put in control, is a good place to be in this pandemic. So I want Cheryl to talk about our finances, give us some outlook indicators, and bring you into that particular conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Just real quickly, I apologize up front for kind of a busy slide here, but it's hard to relay a lot of information about finances without kind of giving a background. So a high-level snapshot for informing decisions in this past year. First of all, fall and spring tuition make up 63% of our revenue. So we are very very tuition dependent at our institution. So as enrollment ebbs and flows, we need to be able to make decisions and be nimble. On the right side, you can see a chart that shows liable credit hours. And liable credit hours is the language that I talk. You'll hear Donnette talk about enrollment. They're really the same thing. Liable credit hours indicate the number of paying credit hours that students are participating in. And you can see in FY19, we were at 103% over the year before, which meant we were trending up, and we had for the past couple of years. In FY20, we jumped to, or flattened out to 99% of the previous year, which meant we had a little bit of a dip, and then COVID hit, which meant we were then preparing for unknown territory of understanding how the pandemic would impact us. So in FY21, we planned for COVID impact by reducing expenses in a two-step process. Number one, as Chancellor Harris mentioned, we suspended hiring for vacancies listed in April of 20 in anticipation of enrollment drops equal to 5%. We had done this previously in 2008 when the economy in the United States was upended. And so that was the first step we took. It was also the first step from our other institutions that we checked in with. So that's kind of the actions that folks came out of the gate with. Secondly, we went back in divisions, trimmed another 5% across the board to ensure that we could have enough capacity to handle up to 10%. You know, we were talking with Donette on a daily basis, trying to understand how COVID was going to impact fall enrollment, and we just had really no idea. So we were talking with other institutions in the state, and they were planning anywhere from a 5 to, in some cases, 20 to 25% reduction. Just nobody knew where we were going to land. So we decided to go ahead and take a total of a 10% reduction. And that, again, that was in 2 phases. Next slide, Patty. Thank you. Right sizing during a pandemic is at best an educated guess. When you look at Upstate, 77% of our total expenses is in payroll and fringe. So we made the decision again to freeze those positions to allow us to get a handle on exactly where we were. And then we took that additional 5% to give us a total of 10%. We did allow some flexibility with the frozen positions in allowing vice chancellors to swap things out. So for instance, in my division, if I had a police vacancy that got frozen and I turned over later a position in facilities, I could swap and choose to hire back the police officer versus the facilities. That was given as an opportunity for the vice chancellors to make some, give them some room to juggle some things within that 5% of freezing. We ended up, while we did plan for 10% to absorb the enrollment fall, we actually ended up at a 6% down, right about 6%. So it gave us extra capacity to roll into the upcoming year. So we knew, we weren't real sure when we rolled into the fall, being down 5 or 6%, what would happen in the spring. So we kind of held our breath, hoping that students would come back in the spring again. They did. So we ended up basically around 5.5% for the year. So that, again, gave us excess capacity to roll into this year. So in case we dropped further, which Donette will speak about, that we would have some excess capacity to cover that. So we did not have to do a knee-jerk reaction when the new chancellor came in. Next slide, please, Patty. You may have heard about HERF funds, or what are Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds. And USC Upstate did participate in these, and we have received funds from the federal government. We had HERF 1, HERF 2, and HERF 3. I have the amounts here on the chart. What's relevant to this information is to know that, number one, 50% of these funds have flowed straight to students. Donette has worked with her team, and they have figured out the methodology for USC Upstate to award these funds directly to students via financial aid process, and those students had checks to walk away with. And it was part of the federal government plan to help students support any debt or extra expenses they had during COVID. The institutional portions, as you'll see, have come in to help us do reimbursements for direct expenditures for COVID. We were able to, when we refunded the students who left spring semester of last year in housing, we had to refund funds to them. We had to refund meal plans to them. So we were able to use those funds to refund those students. The next funds that came in with HERF 2, we were able to pull those funds down to help with revenue losses, which occurred in housing, bookstore, tuition, and then also, again, direct COVID expenses. And now we're just now starting to get into what we call HERF 3. Some important notes about these funds are, number one, they're one-time funds that we're able to pull down. And when I say pull down, what we have to do is actually prove to the government, we actually have to upload the expenses that we're saying we're reimbursing for. So they don't just hand the funds over to Upstate. It works more like a moving fund. For instance, when Dr. Harris moves to Spartanburg, he will have an allocation that he can use. And as he submits expenses against that, he will be able to pull those funds down back to reimburse himself. And so that's the way the HERF funds work. Next slide, Patty. Thank you. For FY22, as I said, and Dr. Harris mentioned, we balanced the budget on a 5% decline from previous fall. Since then, we have found out from the state that we've got a little extra money coming in, as well as the state, as most of you have already heard, appropriated funds for full-time FTE employees to receive a 2% increase. So those funds came to USC Upstate. We received a few more dollars, and so it has prepared us and enabled us to walk into fall prepared to absorb up to, as Chancellor Harris mentioned, a 7% decline in enrollment. Donette will speak more to that. We've got just listed here kind of how we broke down the budget. We've got total resources coming in excluding housing and auxiliaries of 67 million. That's our total budget as far as an operating budget. And you can see the percentages here across the different divisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Cheryl, I do want you to go back just 1 minute to the slide back. The 2% budget increase that 2% full-time FTE pay increase that we received, what percentage did the state fund on that?
On the 2% increase that we get from the state, we jokingly refer to that, sometimes not jokingly, as a mandated state mandate. The state funds about 40% of that increase. So when the state says that we're going to give all full-time employees an increase, they give us about 40% of those funds to cover the increase in salary and fringe. And then the university has to pull the remainder of the money out of our budgets to cover that.
Yeah. So the reason I want to put a pin in that, because it's important that you understand, is that when we receive that particular mandate, which we welcome, I think we need to continue to, and that's one of the things I want to do, is to continue to increase our salaries for our employees. The state only funded at 40%. The other 60% of that we have to absorb within an existing budget. And that is still part of our challenge, and we were able to meet that challenge within some of these particular parameters. So as we look at all of these different opportunities with regard to budget, we're juggling those things to say, how do we achieve this and stay as healthy as we can financially? Also thinking about some of our SACS requirement that we have to maintain 6 months of operating expense in our budget. So that's what I call reserve. I think Cheryl called it something else, but we got to make sure that the institution is financially healthy so that as we go, so we won't have any challenges with our SACS accreditation, and we won't have any challenges, some major pandemic occur, another major pandemic that closed the institution down for a period of time. We have 6 months of reserve that we can continue to operate as an institution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Danette, I'm going to ask you to come and provide an update. I've gotten to know Danette over the last, since I've been here. I've been impressed by her experience, by all that she brings in her leadership and her knowledge in this particular area, and I've had the opportunity to work with her. So I want to say that we're in pretty good hands with Allstate. We're in pretty good hands with Danette here. And so, Danette, I want you to give us an update and just kind of tell us how we all can help as well in this particular arena.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. I appreciate that very much. I want to just kind of tell you where we are now and where we think we're headed in terms of enrollment. And I want to thank all of you who've been helping us throughout the year and throughout the summer to get the enrollment stabilized and to get new students added and to get our continuing students added. I know it feels like we give you a new list every day, but we're just trying to be sure that we communicate with those students as often as we can. So when you look at the chart that I have there for you today, that is where we were on Monday. I always pull the enrollment reports every Monday. And at that point, we had 4,270 students registered. That was about 4.7% down from this time last year. If we were to look at only the undergraduate totals, this time last year, we would have been down about 11%. Some good news to share, though, and many of you have been involved with this all week, is we've brought many families to the campus for new student orientation over the last 3 days. We have increased enrollment significantly this week. So we now have our total head count up to 4,721. And so we still have a long way to go, but at least we're making some progress. We've added about 400 students this week. As you can see there, for the freshman class, we were at about 370. This morning, we're up to about 520 for our freshmen, or for our transfers and readmit students. You see there, we were at 475, and today we're at 623. So we are seeing some good increases in new students stepping up and enrolling at Upstate. We still have a long way to go. Where we really were hoping that we would get the freshman class to about 700. That was kind of the goal that we had set. We're not sure we're going to make that. When we set that goal many, many months ago, there were a few things that were unknown. We didn't know that our friends, Farmer Community College, was going to offer free tuition. We didn't realize that some of the universities across the state were going to offer admission to students they had not offered opportunities to before. So it's changed the outlook on new student enrollment a little bit. But we want to continue to push. We don't want to give up. We want to keep trying to get new students and continuing students added. You can see there, if you look at that continuing student number, of the students who were here in the spring, we've only registered about 2,900 of those students. So our deans and chairs and advisors are continuing to work on those students, hoping that we can get some additional students back and that they have the confidence now that they'd like to try Upstate for fall of 21. So I want to talk about orientation just for a few minutes. Many of you on the call today have been involved with this because certainly it takes everyone on campus to pull off a successful orientation. And I know you probably feel like we've been running you to death this year because we scheduled so many, but we wanted to keep them small. We wanted to keep our students and all of you safe as we hosted the students and their families on campus. And as you can see there on the chart, we had a very good percentage of students who made a reservation actually show up to the orientation. And so those numbers have been going great. We've had about 368 freshman families. We've had about 200 transfer families. And then the block just under that shows you our new virtual orientation. This summer, we wanted to be sure that students who didn't feel comfortable coming in person also had that opportunity to do a virtual orientation. So that's kind of what it looks like now. You can see there we have 2 in-person orientations left. One for all majors, new freshmen on August 17th, one for new transfers on August the 11th, and we'll do one more virtual session on August 10th. So we're all pushing really hard to get more students registered for that. We do still have a lot of students who are admitted to the campus. They have not canceled. They've not made an orientation reservation. They've not registered for classes. And we have called them, texted them, sent lists of them to you, done everything that we know that we can do because we know this year the freshmen and the transfer students seem to need a lot of hand-holding and individual coaching. And so we're trying to do that as much as we can to get those numbers up and to get a few more people ready to go through the registration process. Next, I want to show you kind of our 10-year trend. Cheryl talked a few minutes about our enrollment and kind of the trajectory that we were on until we got to fall of 20. So you can see there over, the last 10 years, things were going pretty good. We were on a nice, steady upward move in our enrollment. And then you can see fall of 20 when we had that decrease due to the pandemic. And the number at 5746, I'm not sure yet if we will meet that. I don't know if we can get that many additional students registered between now and the last day of new student registration. So the reason for that 5746 would be a 5% decrease in enrollment. If we're lucky enough that we can get enough people registered back at Upstate to only be down 5%, that would be our number. And then in working with Dr. Harris, he'd like to see us kind of, get that on an upward trajectory. And so we've got it at 6,500 in 2025. Certainly can't do that without everybody on campus helping us to turn this around, because I've been doing this, as you guys know, for many years. And when your enrollment is kind of on the increase, it's easier to keep it going that way. Once you take a downward turn, it takes a lot of work to turn that around and get our enrollment going back up. But that's what we all want to do together to get this trend headed back in the right direction. I want to quickly just give you an update on financial aid, because we are using financial aid. As many of you know, many of our students are needy. They cannot be here without financial aid. So we want to be sure that we are getting the financial aid in their hands in time to make decisions. You can see here just the number of students who've been awarded. So far, we've awarded $50 million in financial aid. And I've just put a few of the different types of financial aid that we offer there on the sheet so that you can see. We have 2,160 students with a Pell Grant. We have over 7,000 students who are taking out student loans. And soon we'll be dispersing HERF 3. We're just waiting on the final guidance to determine how we can award that money and when, because we would love to be able to get that money on the system before the students have to pay their bills so they can use that to help them pay their tuition. But we're still waiting on final guidance for that. So I thank you all very much for all your help and for, helping us kind of navigate through these unknown waters. It's, with the pandemic, almost impossible to really project what the enrollment's going to be. But we just want to keep pushing and not let up for this next 19 days we have before the first day of class. Dr. Harris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. I appreciate that. So there are a few bullet points I wanted to really highlight out of Jeanette's presentation. When the state and the legislators said to the USC system, particularly speaking to Columbia, that you have to change your enrollment makeup. I think about 55% of their students came from out of state, 45 from in-state. So they wanted them to flip that number to 55 from in-state and 45 from out of state. What that did was open up a number of opportunities for students across the state to go to USC Columbia. So when we look at a strategic plan that says that we want to make USC Upstate a destination of choice, not an alternative to another institution that they couldn't get in, as I've heard, but people come here because we are just that special and we're aligned with their greatest aspiration. That is even more pronounced than ever and something that we have to really advance. So I want to put a pin there because that's something that we're going to be thinking about as we look at our enrollment management plan. Also, when we look at and think about our budget and this 5%, even though the graduate numbers are going to mitigate us from being under 5% from a percentage perspective, financially, the numbers don't pan out quite that way. Not all of our graduate programs cost the same. There are some graduate programs that we offer because it's an important part of our community service and helping the region that don't generate a significant amount of revenue for the institution. So that undergraduate enrollment number is still very much our benchmark for how we're going to look financially in this particular academic year. And then I want Jeanette to come back and just give a really brief perspective on how we compare to other schools in the system from enrollment trending for this upcoming year.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Harris. I'll be glad to. We received a USC system report yesterday that shows that we're all kind of in about the same boat in terms of the USC system. The flagship campus, Columbia campus, is down about 3.8%. Aiken campus and undergrad is down about 5.8%. Beaufort campus 5.1%, and then Upstate was showing 6% down. So we're all very much kind of still struggling with the fall enrollment. And of course, this new Delta variant is concerning all of us because students who are beginning to gain a little bit of confidence, feeling better about coming to school, we're concerned that they're getting nervous again. So okay. It looks like we're all in this together.
And that's a good, thank you, Jeanette, very much. And that's a good transition for Mary to come in and talk to us about our COVID-19 response and our COVID-19 update, which is something that we are looking at every day because it's changing. Much of how South Carolina responds to that and how we have to respond is really what happens nationally, what mandates happen nationally, and where the governor and our state legislators are with regard to what we can and cannot do in this particular space. And so I'm going to ask Meredith to provide an update, and then we'll open the up for a few questions.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. As you stated, this is a global, national, state, and very personal issue for many of us. So I'm here to give a little bit of information. And I'd also like to just say thank you to everyone. Being part of an educational institution during this historic time really shows us what a community we are. The pandemic has really impacted all of us in our personal lives, at work, and it's just such a privilege to work across all the divisions. And in my role, really get to understand how people work. And I just feel so appreciative and have a lot of gratitude for all the efforts everyone has put in and continues to. So I just wanted to say thank you for a moment as we move forward here. Data, as you know, keeps moving on the pandemic. And so at any time, cases may vary, hospitalizations may vary, the variant may vary, how effective things are. So I know it's a lot of information. What I'm going to give you today is a snapshot of where we are at this very moment in time, and the things we're doing and resources available on campus, and where we're putting our energy and efforts this year. So how we're kind of tackling this moving forward, and what the team looks like to help with that as part of your campus. So right now we know the Delta variant is the most prominent in the United States. The data about how prominent Delta is in South Carolina, there's some question marks on that, but what we know is that it's all around us. You'll see from this red map that the level of community transmission, so how easy is it to catch COVID from someone else, or for someone, how quickly this is passing through society, it's very fast. So we're learning more all the time. CDC sent out a health alert on Tuesday. So you'll see at the bottom of my slide, it says CDC health alert from July 27, 2021. That's where this screenshot is from. And that's where they shared that over the last few weeks, there was a 300% increase in community transmission levels and case counts across the United States, particularly in the southeastern United States. So I want anyone who wants to follow this closely, I would encourage you also to sign up for those CDC health alerts. They get into the data and science. DHEC has one as well, but any information we're looking at is coming from those resources. And if you're not sure where to find accurate information, those are great places, and our website will steer you to those as well. So our case rates and hospitalization rates are going up in tandem with the nation. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I have the South Carolina data at the top of this slide, so that in June, we saw around 5,000 cases in South Carolina, and in July thus far, we're up to about 18,000. What we know about the cases also are that 93% of cases reported were not fully vaccinated, and then 86% of those hospitalized were not fully vaccinated, 90% of those who died during that time period were not fully vaccinated. In the spring, the CDC data, the vaccine data had said even better news that 3% of those it was only 3% of those who were hospitalized that had been vaccinated. So the data points move, but the overarching framework and concept is the same, that vaccinations are very, very protective. Okay, so how protective? They're helpful. It's hard to distill sometimes. It feels like messages keep moving on it, but so I like to take a step back and kind of give you the overall trends that vaccines are highly protective against this, even though the number points may move slightly. What we know about Delta is that it is very transmissible, and new data is emerging that even if you're vaccinated, you may be a carrier. So people have heard the CDC kind of shift to say, okay, if you're vaccinated, don't wear a mask. But then this week they said, if you're vaccinated, you actually should, because you still may be a carrier with this Delta variant. So I know that's been a confusing time this week, and we've heard different things. I just wanted to share that that's as we learn more about different variants, and Delta is not the only variant and won't be the last one, unfortunately. You may hear different messages, so please feel free to ask, and we as a campus will continue to monitor the data and share information that we have available and bring resources to campus. Before I move to the next slide, I'm going to take a pause and just say that and thank Jenny Webb. She is our campus microbiologist who's joined the data team and really been instrumental helping us look at data as it moves so quickly. Jenny also has great partnerships in the community and is bringing Dr. Jane Kelly from DHEC back to do a Q&A specific to Delta and the vaccines on August 26th, 3 p.m. So if you're interested and really want to learn more from community experts in DHEC, we'll have lots of opportunities this fall. That's one of which will be coming. So be on the lookout for that. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. So many questions. What are we doing on campus this fall? With Delta and the state of the pandemic right now, one of the best things we can do is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. So CDC is encouraging that. I thank Dr. Harris for his leadership, University Marketing Communications, all of you that have gotten vaccinated and submitted those. And like I said, those of you that have questions and you're not sure, please ask, please take advantage of those expert opportunities that we're bringing in from outside too. So if you want someone who's not part of the campus community to ask questions, those resources will be made available to you. So we're launching a Vax Up campaign. You'll be seeing more of that in our marketing and communications as well. Sorry, I got lost in the slide just for a moment. So in vaccine records, we thank those of you for uploading those. If we are working with IT and with Ron Patain, thank you, Ron, to help make it so all employees can just easily upload their vaccine records. We're not quite there yet, but we hope to be by August 15th. So if you've hit the upload button on our website and it hasn't worked, I apologize for that. If you're on campus, feel free to drop off those records and a copy of that, so we know what your vaccine status is coming to this fall. It's voluntary to submit those records, but it does help us understand the vaccination status of the campus community, and will help our health services and contact tracing this fall as well. So thank you so much for submitting those records. I'm going to move through a little quickly to open up time for questions for the group. So the other things that we can do on campus besides vaccination: face coverings. So we know that face coverings help. We encourage everyone to wear them indoors, regardless of vaccine status. We are expecting folks to wear, especially when they're in closer proximity, face coverings. So in classrooms, health and counseling centers, university transportation, indoor crowded events. Those are spaces where we really want to role model and expect our students and our staff and our faculty to wear face coverings. I really encourage you all to continue having dialogue about what this can look like, what tools we have, and how we achieve this together. I know there are lots of questions that may be on that topic specifically. Thanks to Cheryl and her team, procurement will be looking at getting more of the disposable face masks. So if you need face masks or someone comes into your area and doesn't have one, we'll look at distributing those so those can be easily accessible in all areas of campus. For physical distancing, please keep yourselves distanced when you can. Be mindful in your staff meetings. As it gets cooler, outdoors is safer than indoors for the virus. So if there are opportunities to eat lunch outside and you want to do that, please do. So you can meet indoors. Please wear masks when you do, and please keep a little distance between yourself and others. I will share too, our health services team did a stellar job last year, so I want to give a shout out to them, but we had to learn and implement contact tracing, testing. So we do test for COVID. We have same day results, PCR test, antigen testing. So if you're sick, call us, stay home. We don't need the supervisors to call, just individuals. Please call us and we'll get you taken care of and help diagnose whatever may be going on and get you treatment you need. We'll do that contact tracing, exposure notification, just as we did last year. So for sake of time, I'm going to not get into much detail there, except to say thank you all. And I'll be working closely with the units. So if faculty have questions, if different operational units have questions, we'll be continuing to work with different groups on campus to help clarify any processes and recommendations over the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I appreciate that. And again, as I continue to be impressed with the team here. You all this is a phenomenal team. I appreciate very much the diligence that exists among this team to keep me informed and to help us all make the best decision that we can make. I know Mary did not expect this to be a lifetime appointment when she took on this role about a year or so ago. But I approached her early on and asked her if she would continue it. I think that continuity is important. So let me give a framework before we go into questions. We have about 15 minutes that we can have questions. We have two interesting provisos in the state of South Carolina. We got a proviso 117.163 and 117.190. And both those one of them say that we cannot mandate mask, and we cannot mandate vaccinations. And those are laws on the state of South Carolina books that we have to comply with. And so within the context of those two law provisos, we are trying to find the very best strategy and pathway forward that we can keep our community safe and that we can bring our community back to campus safely, protect our employees and protect our students. Okay, that's our framework and our parameters. We could do a lot of debating about a lot of things, but some of this debate going to have to occur in the town square. It won't be able to occur here at USC Upstate, because we also have a governor who, even with the Delta variant, most recently he Twitter out. Is that what we call it? Twitter? Tweet it out. You're gonna have to help me here, Jessica. That that personal responsibility is the precursor to many of the decisions that he's making regarding whether he's going to mandate, and he has also mandated that we're back in the classroom, we're back in the workforce, et cetera. So there are a lot of things that we're dealing with from a system perspective. There are a lot of things we're navigating from institutional perspective. In all of our institutions, we're all struggling with the exact same thing. And we're going to allow more time to ask questions, but we also want you not just to ask questions, we want you to invite you to help us to create solutions. One of the best solution and protection for this is each of us getting vaccinated, okay? I was a little bit disappointed when I learned that 80% of us had responded in a survey. Not quite the whole community responded to that survey. About 300 plus people responded, but of those responded, 80% said they were vaccinated. But we only have 10% of us who have uploaded our cards to give that particular evidence of that vaccination. Why is that important? Because if we want to have a message about how we as a community feel about vaccination, it is so important that I can say 80% of our Upstate employees are vaccinated. I can say that with confidence. And that gives confidence to our students. It gives confidence to our parents. It gives confidence to our community that this is serious. And we have to put a level of seriousness behind vaccination by us exemplifying that important strategy and behavior. So if you've been vaccinated, I'm asking you, I'm appealing to you to upload your card so that we can have that, so we can say that we are a strong believer and advocate for vaccination. That's number one. That's going to keep me as safe as I can keep myself and keep from those of you who don't believe in vaccination for whatever reason, right? So the policies that we have, so we can't mandate anything, and we can't penalize students for making decisions not to get vaccinated. So we're doing everything we can to frame language, to phrase it in such a way that can compel folks to do this. But the most effective way is going to be personal conversation. A lot of that has taken place in athletics. Matter of fact, we had 8 students, athletes, to get vaccinated. I think our basketball team probably has 100%. Is that correct, Daniel? Of close to it.
Yes.
Who are vaccinated. So, but that's happening because the coaches are taking leadership and emphasizing how important this is. And I believe you as faculty and employees have that same power and authority. One of the things the students have said to me when I talk to them about why you attend USC Upstate, they say because it feels like home, and they have the greatest faculty. So you have a lot of influence over these young people and the behaviors they choose to participate in. So I'm asking you to leverage that behavior and talk to them about staying safe, because you want to see them around, you want to see them graduate, you want to see them do all of this wonderful stuff to change the world. And this Delta variant is going to get in the way of them being able to do that. So you had 15 minutes to ask questions. Now you got 10, because I took about 5 minutes talking a little bit too much. So are there questions, Kimberly, that we can try to address?
I don't have any hands yet, but there's a lot in the chat. So I will direct our attention first to Lee. He's asking if there's any talk about being able to require vaccinations for students participating in athletics or performing arts. Mary, do you want to address the athletics part of that?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. If there are any specific events, our job is to help kind of look at risk and how we can mitigate that risk. So what they do in athletics, for example, even if we can't mandate that all athletes are vaccinated, we're trying to encourage, offer access to all of that, but they have a testing program. And so I don't know, Lee, we can work together and follow up for performing arts things when would we say, all right, if we're going to be in a large close group, let's test. One example of this that we're exploring would be the gospel choir singing at convocation. We want that to happen. That would be wonderful. We want that to be done safely. So whether it's through distancing and masks or whether that's not possible and it's a maskless, high, close contact activity, would we implement some testing? So feel free to reach out to me and we can work with your team on how to do that.
let me add to that. Daniel, I'm going to want you to talk about what the NCAA is doing and how is that being helpful in athletics' ability to assert more influence.
Thank you. Yeah, the NCAA, of course, like everything else, the policy has evolved throughout the last year, and 3 or 4 times throughout the year, the testing protocol has changed. Their testing protocol for this fall is not yet finalized, so we're sitting here kind of on pins and needles waiting for that. But it is believed that testing protocol will likely be that vaccinated students would not have to test unless they have symptoms, whereas unvaccinated student athletes would have to test. And the frequency of the test is still a little bit up in the air. Last year, that depended upon whether the sport was an indoor sport or outdoor, and therefore was the risk higher or lower, and whether or not they were in season. So those are the kinds of considerations. We're encouraging all of our students, student athletes, to get vaccinated. In part, this would work for all students as well, not just student athletes, that based on the idea that they don't have to quarantine, at least at present, if they're vaccinated. And I think that that is a great incentive for all students to return to some capacity of a regular life and not be as concerned about quarantining all the time if they're exposed to someone who has the virus. And so that's one of the incentives, as well as athletic teams, many rules of which this year will be that if a team misses a game because of they cannot attend because of a COVID issue, they will likely get a forfeit loss as opposed to just a postponement. And that would be another incentive for us to get our student athletes vaccinated.
Okay, thank you. If I can also add, in the proviso, one of the things that we notice and the chancellors and presidents across the state of all the schools, not just the system, are meeting every Monday, basically. And one of the things that we notice, and we've gotten a reading from the Attorney General on this, is that we can require everybody, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, to wear a mask. What we know about people who are vaccinated, they want to have the option not to wear a mask. So it becomes a disincentive for them to get vaccinated if they still have to wear a mask, right? Uniformly across all activities. We know that about their behavior, particularly this particular age group of young people, that if they get vaccinated, they want to be able to not have to wear a mask. And there was another point, I can't think of it right now. So we know that. Now, what we also know that if we require that across the board, it will be challenged, because that was not the intent of the proviso. The intent of it was to not have any requirements of that nature. But because they wrote it so quickly, and to some extent did not think through all of the details of it, it does allow for that open. So some schools had tried that. I think Columbia had tried it and got it pulled back when the Attorney General said it will be challenged. Coastal Carolina has decided they're not going to do anything. It's just going to be people going to come and figure it out on their own. That's not the posture that we're going to take. We're going to take what Mary just presented to us as well. Okay. I think there's a Kim. You're controlling this, so I'm not. I think there's a George Williams who has.
Yes, and that was a wonderful response that I think covered a lot of the questions in the chat. So thank you, Dr. Harris. George, do you want to ask your question?
Good morning. Should we plan on continuing to have our department meetings virtually? Because those of us who have meetings upwards of 20 people will not be able to find spaces where we can socially distance ourselves in the recommended ways. So should we continue to hold virtual department and potentially committee meetings? Thank you.
Let's work with Dr. Johnson and Dr. Schechter and addressing some of those types of issues. I have a whole list of questions from our faculty regarding how to carry out business. And so nuances like that, we're going to work with faculty senate and with the office of the provost to address those particularly much more specifically. What I want to do is just provide a global framework for how we're having to make some of these decisions. So that's not to pivot against your question, but I think it's going to be addressed much more effectively when the faculty and us, and we come together and just talk about the nuances of those things, those types of individual questions.
Thank you, sir. Michelle Garland asks if we're going to provide face coverings for students attending in-person classes this fall.
Yes, we're going to have face covering in every location. So if we haven't ordered them yet, they will be ordered.
I'll share, we won't be offering the cloth face coverings like we did last year, though. So we'll be doing the disposable face coverings this year. And it is the expectation that all students, faculty, and staff have a face covering of their own with them. So it's not that we're going to be giving hundreds and thousands of these daily. It's that it's all of our responsibility to do that in society right now, including when we come to work at school, but we're all human and we're all going to forget sometimes. So we'll have them available, but we will be having the paper ones available. And Kim, can I jump on to 2 other questions I see in the chat, or tag back to one more? Thank you. Jane Brown, thanks for your question. I saw in the chat 3 feet versus 6 feet. We know this is where World Health and CDC have had differing opinions for a long time. We know 3 feet is protective. Any of the European studies and lots of the international studies were based on 1 meter, so a little bit more than 3 feet. We know 6 feet of distancing provides a little bit additional protection. Some of the US K through 12 studies were also done at that 3 feet or 1 meter distance with masks in place. So we know that 3 feet plus masks offers pretty good protection. Now, Delta is highly transmissible. Perfect protection, no, there's nothing perfect in any of this, but in terms of 3 feet versus 6 feet, what we learned in looking at classrooms, and we can look at, like I said, the K through 12 studies, and CDC and DHEC have adopted that 3 feet plus masks in that cohorted classroom setting specifically is also pretty protective.
Let me add to a couple clarification. You're all very smart people, so I can't get anything over you, so I'm not going to ever try, right? We can't require anything. So I have leaned on our English and our language folks to use the strongest words, such as, how do we write that? Expected. What do we say that? I'm trying to read it somewhere.
Face covering.
Face covering are expected, okay? So I'm hoping that by using language like are expected versus strongly encourage will lead people to put a face mask on. Our reality is, as we go into this, we can't penalize them if they choose not to. According to the law, according to the interpretation of the Attorney General, according to what Columbia is trying to do, and Dr. Pastides has spoken with them, and they said you can't penalize them. You can't do anything. So you have no enforceability of a requirement or the word require. So why play games like that? That's where I am. So I'm using the word very strongly that it is expected that each of you and each of us will wear face cover. Now, I'm going to say, what you going to do if I don't wear one? Really, I can't do much. But we're trying to figure some things out, right? So we're using this type of language to create that community. And I think the most compelling thing that we can do is to persuade people to do the right thing for the community, not just themselves, but for their peers and those around them. And it's going to take a lot of work on your part on leveraging your skills of conflict management, of conflict mitigation, because there are going to be students in the classroom who are going to resent students who choose not to wear masks. And then you're going to have the tension there. So we got to figure out how we're going to diffuse that tension as a community. And this is changing every day. So next week, we may come out and learn something that the governor now has mandated something because of the pervasiveness of this Delta variant. Okay, and we see that's happening at the federal level. We see a number of things. We see a number of Republican governors coming now are encouraging vaccines when they weren't encouraging them at first. And they're asking everybody to take vaccines. So people, this is getting very personal for folks, right? And so I believe I'm sending a communication out this afternoon with these particular guidelines, but I can't wait for 3 weeks for things to continue to change to give our community some direction as to what we're going to do with what we can do today. And if that changes next week, I'll send another communication out that incorporates that. So you'll get a chance to hear from me a couple times. I'm hoping I have the opportunity to send another communication out with much more restrictive guidelines. That's what I'm hoping for. Okay, our time is out. We will have opportunities to have other types of conversation. I want to leave you with a couple things. I feel good about where we are financially. Okay. I'm not excited about our ability to innovate and to do a number of things just yet, but I feel good about, given where we are in a pandemic, with all of these forces we just talked about, that we are in a good place. Okay. I feel good about enrollment projections. Okay. And we may have to have some adjustments, but I feel good about where we are today. And I feel good about our response to COVID-19. And I feel good about that because I believe in each of you. And I think we can do this together. So thank you all very much. I'm always available for a conversation, and we're in this together. Have a blessed day.